And there we go. How about that? So that's this little amp over here. I got the new one, and I had a white one, but I wanted the black one, so I got the black one. So that came in yesterday, so I thought I'd give it a spin. Exclusive content for you. Exclusive. I like it. It's really, really, really cool. Positive Grid is the name of the company, and this is called the Mini, I think, something like that. It just came out. It's a little battery-powered mini amp that has unlimited amount of possibility of tones and things. Now, that guitar that I was playing, it's a Gibson. It's not a Les Paul. It's called a The Paul. A The Paul. It's called the Firebrand version of a Les Paul. But I bought it years ago, and I really like it. So I thought I'd give it a shot this morning. So what are we going to talk about today? We are going to talk about Final Cut Pro 10.6.6 and Final Cut on the iPad. Those are the two things we'll be talking about. So we'll see how that goes this morning. We had a lot of conversation. I've seen conversation all over the internet, of course. Everybody's got an opinion about stuff. So I figured I'd come on here and continue the conversation that we had yesterday. Now, if you weren't here yesterday, we got a phone call from Apple, and it was 10 minutes till 11. And I asked them what time it's going to come out, because we're sitting here waiting. And they said 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock Eastern time. Just a second. Grab your beverage. If you have one. And anyway, they said 1 o'clock. And I said, can't you go into the App Store and press the Go Live button and go live a little bit earlier than 1 o'clock? And they said they see what they can do. Well, we hung up. 5 minutes later, it was live. Final Cut for the iPad came out. It was kind of funny. The timing was funny, but it just worked out that's what it was. It came out like a little before 11 East Coast time. We got a couple comments here. Good morning from Flagstaff, Arizona. Absolutely. Flagstaff, Arizona. Good morning. Can't wait to continue the conversation. So here we are continuing the conversation. So we'll see. As usual, I remember when Final Cut came out, Final Cut 10, or X, as a lot of people called it. Even Apple themselves called it X. During and what was it? I think it was a Final Cut Creative Summit. They said one of the things that have changed is we've dropped the X or the 10 or whatever you call it. That was Apple themselves that said that. So, whatever. To me, it was Final Cut Pro X initially, and then when you say it though, it's like 10. I even have a compilation video out there somewhere on YouTube where all the people were saying X, 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 X. Everybody was. Even Apple people were saying X. Anyway, Final Cut Pro on the iPad. What do you think about that? What do you think about Final Cut on the iPad? I've talked about it. Let me just make sure that cord's not in the way. Yeah, it's okay. So I've talked about the last few days, and it's not for me. It's not for me for a couple of reasons. And the more that I see it out there, I've got a page up of reviews, video reviews on YouTube, and I have a page up of articles about Final Cut for the iPad. And there's two or three things. Am I excited about it? Yes. Am I pro Final Cut for the iPad? Yes. I am pro Final Cut for the iPad. However, I'm not going to be buying it. I'm not going to be renting it. I'm not going to be using it for many reasons. And the first reason is I'm not buying a new iPad. I'm not in the market for a new iPad. My other iPad is too old for it. I will continue to use LumaFusion when I need to edit on an iPad. It's a fantastic application. It's been out for years, It's a really good application, so I'll continue to use LumaFusion. If I get a new iPad on my schedule, I'll get a new iPad on my schedule. I won't be getting an iPad on Apple's schedule just because they put Final Cut Pro out. I'm not going to do that. But let me just make sure things, let me see something here. I'm just going to type something. Just to make sure everything's working. I have to test things as we're live. I got a kick out of some people. Yeah, it's working. I got a kick out of some people. When we went to NAB, I was one-man operation, one-man person. And some people were bragging about having a 50-man crew. It's like, you don't need a 50-man crew. Maybe half a dozen. You don't need 50, that's for sure. But anyway, right here I'm operating on my own. So the Final Cut for the iPad, number one, I'm happy that it came out. I am glad for everybody who wants to edit on the iPad. Absolutely. It's not for me. I'll give you a couple of reasons. Number one, I use LumaFusion, and LumaFusion works on my old iPad. And LumaFusion's been around for years. They've been honing this for years and years and years. If and when, well, I would say when I get a new iPad, at that point, I'll go ahead and, rent Final Cut for the iPad for a month, and then I'll cancel the subscription before it renews because I won't need it every month. But I'm really glad it's out, but that's not for me. I like my MacBook Pro. And the reasons, number one, I have an older iPad, it doesn't work. Number two is I have LumaFusion if I need to edit on an iPad, which is a great application. And something I found out yesterday. Here's number three, and it's a big one. The subscription is another issue. That's another issue. But that's the fact that you can rent it for a month and then cancel it for 2 months or 3 months or come back to it 6 months later for 1 month makes it more appealing. I would not do a yearly subscription under any circumstances. I wouldn't use it that much. Here's the third thing. After all these years, the Final Cut Pro team has still not had figured out how to do a scrolling timeline. I was absolutely shocked yesterday when I saw a demo online, and once again, the playhead scrolls off the screen and out of sight on the Final Cut for iPad. So that's a third reason I won't get it. That's just me, and I'm not saying it's not good. It is good. It's fine for a lot of people. And I'm really glad that it's out, but it's not for me. I won't be getting it. I'm not buying an iPad is the biggest reason. So let's let that go for the time being until you have something to say about it. I'm going to pull this up. This is, number one, is I have a Facebook group for Final Cut for the iPad because, as I explained yesterday, I have a tips and tricks Facebook group for Final Cut. And what I didn't want to happen is to have a lot of questions and influx of people asking Final Cut for iPad. That's one thing I did not want. Let me just pull this up real quick. So one of the things, well, let me just show you. Come on now. All these notifications popping up. Where is that? Here we go. So this is the Facebook group that I have. Final Cut Tips and Tricks. And I didn't want a lot of people coming in here asking questions. Look, we're live on there. Didn't want a lot of people asking questions about Final Cut for iPad in this group. So what I did was, it's down here somewhere. There's my poll. So what I did was, to avoid people coming into this group asking about Final Cut on the iPad, I've created a separate group, Final Cut for iPad Tips and Tricks, specifically concentrating on tips and tricks rather than, it's general discussion as well, of course, but mostly tips and tricks. And of course, there's not a whole lot of tips and tricks yet, but there's going to be. So anyway, then I created this one, Final Cut tips and for iPad tips and tricks. So we have a companion site to the Final Cut Pro tips and tricks, Final Cut for iPad tips and tricks. That's the reason I created this. All right, so that'll continue. I have almost 9,000 people in the other one. This one will build up to be hundreds, 200, 300, 400,000, 2,000, whatever. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. So one of the other things I did was master list for Final Cut for iPad. This is what I do this a lot. So here's a master list for iPad. You can get it at fcpx.tv, of course. Tutorials, reviews, videos, articles. So we have Final Cut for iPad. There's Apple tips and tricks Facebook group, which we just saw. Final Cut user guide. Have you seen that? It's a Final Cut user guide. Final Cut Pro user guide for iPad. So we have that. And then we have some articles. The biggest features missing from Final Cut for iPad at launch. There's an article about the biggest features. This is Apple Insider, the biggest features missing from the iPad at launch. Okay, there's one review. First impressions, Final Cut for iPad. Let me see, this is Mac Stories, Final Cut for iPad. But anyway, you can get all these articles over there. And I have a whole list of YouTube videos. I mean, dozen or more. So there's one. There's our live streams from yesterday. Here's another one. Final Cut for iPad, Final Cut Pro, how usable, Final Cut Pro on iPad. The whole list of Final Cut on iPad videos. They're right here. Just one place. You can go to one place, and I'll keep this updated as I get more and more. At some point, I'll stop. But you can get over there at fcpx.tv. Just go to the main website and then click on Master List for Final Cut for iPad. Master List, Final Cut for iPad. There you go. Final Cut for iPad. Let me see what's going on over there. The bird feeder. There's a bluebird. We like the bluebirds. They come around quite a bit. There's certain food that attracts them. I forget what it is. I'm not sure. Look at all the birds out there. So, have another question. Tyler says they must have a reason why they don't do a scrolling timeline. What do you think the reason is? There's no reason. There's zero reason. Every other app does it. Every other app on the iPad, video app on the iPad does it. CapCut does it. iMovie does it. LumaFusion does it. Everybody does it. On the desktop version, everybody does it. Premiere does it. Avid does it. Everybody has a scrolling timeline. But for some reason, the Final Cut Pro team thinks that a timeline that scrolls completely off the screen and out of sight, you don't even see it. It's not even the option to page it. Out of sight, where's my timeline? Where's my timeline? Oh, it's off the screen somewhere. They think that's better than a scrolling timeline. It obviously can be done. Everybody else does it. Everybody. Logic has two of them. Motion has one. There are other pro apps. Both have scrolling timelines. So it's obviously, it's ridiculous at this point. But I wouldn't get the iPad version just for that reason alone. I'm not going to subscribe to an app that has, I don't need it. I have a MacBook Pro. I like the desktop. If I'm mobile, I'm using my MacBook Pro. At this point, I'll use LumaFusion. It's a superior NLE on the iPad. and it has a scrolling timeline, and it has the ability to lock clips in the timeline, and it has the ability to color code clips, and it has an overview timeline under the viewer. You can see the entire timeline under the viewer. There's a lot of reasons I like LumaFusion. But, once again, I am very glad that Final Cut for the iPad is out there. I mean, I did the master list for it. I have a Facebook group that people can go over there and, share their tips and tricks, what it's for. But it's just not for me at this point. And I've said from the very beginning that I reserve the right to change my mind going down the road. But I just can't see editing on an iPad for me, for the most part. Even when I'm traveling, I use my MacBook Pro, which is very powerful. And there's a lot of features that are not in Final Cut for the iPad. I've said for months, there's no way there's going to be feature parity between the iPad version and the Final Cut desktop version. And of course, there's not. There's dozens of things that the desktop version have that the iPad version doesn't have. Now, by the same point is the iPad version, you can use the pencil. Can't do that in a desktop version. And the iPad version has that cool little thumb wheel on the side that, you move the playhead, I guess, a frame at a time. That's pretty cool. The ability to write on the screen, very cool, very cool. Until we have a touchscreen Mac that you can write on, MacBook Pro, I don't think that's going to, obviously it's not going to happen. So George says, Final Cut 10.6.6 disappointing update. I'm using DaVinci to make up for Final Cut Pro deficiencies. Right now turning over color to Company 3 and have gone through Resolve on the way back through Resolve. So there's this 10.6.6 is not a big feature update per se, but they did give us some new things. They did absolutely give us some new things. So this is not the big update that I'm expecting with 10.7 or Final Cut 11. This is not it. This is an interim step to get us there. And I said before it was released, I said, Final Cut Pro team, give us something. Don't just make this a compatibility update for the iPad. And they didn't do that. They did not do that. Let me just show you one of the things. Here's what I found. Yesterday I was saying, I don't know where the new titles are. I don't know where the new transitions are. I don't know where the new generators are. I found them. And you can find them very easy. Here you go. This is headline. This is the new text effects, the new text titles. I just did a quick screen grab this morning. There's some nice titles and stuff in there. I like them. There's things that I would use especially for social media and things. So these are the titles that I found. There they go. There you go. So there's the titles, and then we had some backgrounds. These are some of the backgrounds. This is in the generators category, of course. But these are all new. These are all new. You don't have them in 10.6.5. They're only available in 10.6.6. So these are some of the things that they gave us in the new update. I like them. I certainly will be using some of these myself. And here is, let me play one more for you. Let me see if I have feature period. Oh, this is the same one. This is transitions. Some of the transitions. These are the new ones that aren't there, that were just been released in 10.6.6. So my point is that this is not the big update. This is not 10.7 or Final Cut Pro 11. This is 10.6.6. It has some new things in it. So Tyler says 10.6.6 has been a huge speed performance update for me on my M1 Max. ProRes RAW performs well and even looks better in HDR. The HDR thing is also a very cool update that they did, where it's now a mixed timeline between HDR and SDR. You don't have to worry about going up there and choosing the effect and make sure you got the right one. It's all automatic now. And it's matter of fact, it's on by default. You have to turn it off in preferences or settings. Color adjustments is also much better tool for grading in HDR in 10.6.6. So these are what I'm saying. So this is not a big feature update, but it is a good, solid point update. Okay? And which I was asking for, please give us something besides compatibility with the iPad version. That would have been very lame if they did that, and they didn't do it. They did not do that. The background remover is what I was excited about. I thought it would be like Resolve Magic Mask, but it's just worthless and feels like a gimmick. If you watch, so I have another page over there at fcpx.tv that goes through Final Cut Pro 10.6.6. It has limitations. It's not meant to be a $100 plugin. People are comparing it to that one plugin, Keeper. It's not meant to replace a $100 plugin. It's just something that works. It has criteria. You got to use a static background, plain color background. You got to film the background before you enter the shot and then enter the shot. And that's when it performs best. Is it 100% as good as everything else? No. But it's something that's new. That's new. I haven't tried it yet. I've just seen demos of it. So maybe they'll improve it going forward, give us some controls. I think that the color handling update is a pretty big deal in the long term. I think it's a pretty good deal right now as well. Absolutely. So here's what I've done. I first off made a copy of 10.6.5 before I updated to 10.6.6. Let me just pull this over here. I'm just going to pull this over. There we go. So make a copy of 10.6.5 before you go to 10.6.6. That's number one, which I did. But I have two operating systems, my main one and then the one I'm on now, which is mainly for live streaming. It's a very bare bones version of Ventura. And I'm still on 13.1. I haven't updated to 13.2 or 13.3. I'm not going to until a month goes by with no problems with Final Cut, because was some problems with Final Cut. So on my main machine, I updated to 10.6.6, but on this machine, I have not. On this machine, I'm on 10.6.5, and I won't update this machine, even though I made another copy. I got an email from Motion VFX yesterday that said 10.6.2 kills FX plug 3.0, which is what M2 needs to run. Do not update to 10.6.6 if you use MO2. So did they know that ahead of time? Did Motion VFX know that before 10.6.6 was released? If they did, they should have notified their customers ahead of time. Don't update Final Cut Pro until we give you the all clear. They didn't have to say when it was coming out or what the version number was. They could have said that in advance if they knew it in advance, and I think they did. From the emails that I've seen, they did know it in advance. Yeah, well, that's always a problem. That's why you make a backup copy. That is exactly why you make a backup copy. I noticed when I updated 10.6.6, all the libraries have to be updated. Right there, that's a clue. Right there, that is a clue that something big is going on. So what else do we have here? I'm just going to check and see what's going on. So WWDC is coming up. Do you think there's going to be anything Final Cut related to WWDC? I mean, not a new release of Final Cut, but if the Mac Pro is shown, they could demo an unreleased version of Final Cut, absolutely. Let me just see what's going on here on Twitter. Checking here some Final Cut. Oh, also, we haven't even talked about Logic, but that's not what this show is about. And I would not be getting Logic Pro on the iPad. I like it on the Mac desktop, so it's not for me. But for other people, I completely understand. And I'm glad it's there. I'm absolutely glad it's there. There's some people. People's comments just are funny sometimes. So I know. Let me pull this up. Chris Hawking's been playing around with Final Cut iPad, going back and forth between Final Cut iPad and the desktop, the iPad version and the desktop version. Let me see. And one of the things he said was, let me pull this up. One of the things he said, there it is, Final Cut for iPad. We had that yesterday. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Let me see if I can go back. Yeah, there we go. So one of the things he said was, Final Cut for iPad on a 5K monitor is pretty disappointing. I was hoping I could use it as a viewer, but apparently not. You also can't drag the picture-in-picture window to it. So, yeah, that is disappointing that it doesn't work on the 5K iPad. Let me just see what else I have here. There's been, as usual, there's been hot and cold reviews of Final Cut for the iPad. One of the weird things was this. I saw this post this morning on a public Facebook group that they said, since 10.6.6 update, if you do a jump cut, there's a slight sound dropout. Now, I have not experienced that myself, but this is one of the reports and one of the things that we're discussing here this morning. So, speaking of Chris Hawking, does 10.6.6 seem to affect B-Raw Toolbox in any way? Want to make sure it doesn't knock it offline. Chris said that his testing, no, it does not. His testing, everything, all his plugins are working in 10.6.6. Fingers crossed. Also, if you're still on an Intel Mac, don't update or you would lose all the 32-bit plugins from Motion VFX like MFlare. Great point. If you're on an Intel Mac, don't update to 10.6.6 because I don't know why. Why doesn't Apple warn people about some of these things? I would think there would be a warning that said, hey, if you're on an Intel Mac and you depend on some third-party plugins, don't update to 10.6.6 until the third-party plugin manufacturers update their plugins. There are a bunch of FX Factory plugins that are dead in 10.6.6 as well. This plugin thing really mystifies me. Don't they? I'm sure they're on the beta, aren't they? These major plugin manufacturers, I'm sure they're on the beta version of 10.6.6. Did they know in advance that 10.6.6 was going to break their stuff? I would have thought they would have had to, right? I mean, it seems like, yes, they would have had to. So they weren't prepared, didn't have enough time. But in any event, somebody should have warned people, don't update to 10.6.6 if you have certain plugins. FX Factory, VFX, whatever they are, Motion VFX. Somebody should have warned people, but you always should make a copy before you update. So if you did that, you're able to go back, I think. Now, if you updated your library, that's a different separate issue. If you're updated the library, that's a separate issue. So let's go back over to our, let me go back over here. Let me just check one thing real quick. Look at all the birds. Today's a good bird day. Good bird day. I can't see what kind of birds those are. They look brown. Starlings. Maybe they're baby starlings. That could be. Anyway, let's go back over to Master List for iPad over there at fcpx.tv. You can find it over there. So, for example, you can do this.
Been a theme at every iPad announcement for the last few years. We have incredible hardware, but we're missing the professional quality software to really put it to use. That has finally changed.
Okay. There we go. There's one. Here's another one.
In this video, let's take a look at Final Cut Pro for iPad. We'll go over its main features, what's new and different, and consider who this is for.
There you go. And there's another one. Here's another one.
Welcome back, my pet amigos. It is Chris Nichols here with Petapixel. Today, Jordan and I are both going to be on camera because we both have played with the brand new Final Cut for the iPad. I think we're going to come at this from two very different perspectives. Let's get to it.
So there's another one. Here's our live streams from yesterday, which are very popular.
Final Cut Pro for the iPad is finally here, and it's even better than I expected. So in this video, we're going to walk through the application and show you how to get the most out of it.
So some of these are reviews, and some of these are tutorials. There's two different combinations, two different ones. I mean, there's a dozen or more. There's more than a dozen. 6 colors.
Right, it's great for podcasters. Logic is not for podcasters. We are not here to talk about Logic, though. We are here to talk about Final Cut. And actually what this is not so much a talk as a demo. Hi, we are...
So it's a demo. Now, what he just said was Logic is not for podcasters. BS. BS. I've been using Logic for podcasting for 17 years. It absolutely is for podcasts. Nonsense. I've been podcasting longer than they have. I use Logic all the time for podcasting. But anyway, we have a whole bunch of these. I'm not going to play every one.
I use my iPad for a lot of my photography work, and the ability to edit photos with Apple Pencil just feels right. But
I mean, there's a lot of them. There's our friend Mark Spencer, of course. Lots of theirs. How usable is another one.
So this was unexpected. I think
another one. There's iJustine.
Hey, it's Justine, and today we are checking out Final Cut Pro for the iPad.
Anyway, there's I have a whole list of all those over there at fcpx.tv. Dozens and dozens of tutorials and reviews on just specifically for the iPad. So we have, it says, surprise that text-based editing wasn't in the update. So text-based editing, I guarantee you that's coming. It has to be coming. They are so far behind. They're months behind that. Bought the Ripple training tutorial on iPad. Lots more in there than I thought. Good version 1. He said we get echo when you play the video. Sorry, that's my mic. I'm playing it back on my MacBook going through my mic. I'll mute my mic next time. Thank you for telling me. With 10.6.6, I had a bug. 32-bit float audio stick plugins saw waveforms, but audio wouldn't make sound through speakers. Reinserted plugins, and it worked. Okay. Wish that 10.6.6 would just get kind of on par with Resolve or as close as possible. Yeah, they're pretty far behind. Final Cut Pro is pretty far behind the development cycle. This 10.6.6 was a good update, a point update. Remember, it's point. It's not even a point update. But no, they have to listen. Text-based editing. Come on. I'm sure they have it available. I guess it's not perfected yet. I use Resolve for that specifically. I use Resolve for my text-based editing. It works very, very well. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to pay for transcription and all that stuff. You just got to pay for the basic app, DaVinci Resolve. Studio version, $2.99, same as Final Cut. It works very, very well, and I use it for any time I'm doing open captions or transcriptions or any of that. It works very well. Now I'm using the beta version, 18.5 beta 3 right now. So let me hear some more of your opinions. Who bought Final Cut for the iPad? What do you think about 10.6.6? Give me a thumbs up if you like this broadcast. That's always helpful. I'm not likely to do any more this week. This will be the last one until Saturday. And we'll have our usual Final Cut TV and coffee on Saturday at 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock seems to work pretty darn well. Pretty darn well. So, there's a lot. I mean, I'm looking at all the videos. I haven't even watched them all yet. It's pretty extensive. Now, if you noticed, Ripple Training had their iPad for Final Cut Pro for iPad tutorials up, and just like I thought was going to happen, they have a free tier, like so many of them for free. I think the first 9 are free, and if you want the 10 and on, you have. Thank you for giving me a thumbs up. I appreciate it. And subscribe too. Don't forget the subscription. You guys have really been subscribing, so thank you very much. They have the free tier, 1 through 9 I think is free, and then you pay if you want to get 10 onwards. But Final Cut, Ripple hasn't been doing much Final Cut stuff for years, just because there's been nothing to do. They've jumped over to Resolve and do more Resolve training. If you notice this year at NAB, there is very little Final Cut Pro training for Future Media Concepts. There's only 1 or 2 Final Cut Pro tiers because of the slow pace of development. Slow pace of development. Ripple didn't do any training at NAB. They did 0 training for Future Media Concepts. That's the first time, as long as I can remember, they haven't done any training. They just, there's no audience for Final Cut Pro training. They didn't even do version 5, if I'm not mistaken. They skipped from 4 and they went to 6. There was nothing in Final Cut Pro 5 that was really worth doing a whole course on. And then they jumped on Resolve. They have Resolve training 16 and 17 and 18, I think. I know they have 17 and 18 because I got the 17 training. And if you got the 17 training, you got the free update to the 18 training so far. So they have Final Cut 6, 10.6 basic training, but it's not as extensive as previous ones. I think they're more successful with Resolve training at this point. Now, this Final Cut on iPad is a bit of a boost. It's created, exactly what I thought it was going to do. It's created buzz in the industry about Final Cut. This is why I was mystified why they didn't introduce it before NAB. What harm would it have done? It would have created buzz at NAB, whether it's, people talking about it. But they didn't for some reason, and they did it before WWDC, which is also a head scratcher. I'm interested in WWDC, not from a developer's point of view, because I'm not a developer, but to see if the Mac Pro comes out, and to see if the Mac Pro comes out, they're certainly going to demo Final Cut Pro on there. Now, I don't know if there's going to be a new iPad Pro. If there's going to be a new iPad Pro, get my attention. I'll take a look at that and see what's going on. That's weird. My dock is moving for me. Thank you for the thumbs up, William. I appreciate it. All righty. Let me see what else is going on. I'm just going to check. So once again, I have Final Cut Pro group for iPad. Tips and tricks specifically. This is not just a general run-of-the-mill Final Cut Pro for iPad. This is concentrating on tips and tricks. Once there's tips and tricks. Right now, there's not that many tips and tricks, but people will have it. And also, we can discuss bugs. You can have a general discussion, but this is more, if you go back and look, there's a dozen Final Cut Pro Facebook groups. I belong to probably 8 myself. So there's going to be more than one Final Cut for iPad Facebook group. There's not just going to be one. There's not just going to be 2. There's probably going to be half a dozen or more. But this one is specifically, once it gets going, for tips and tricks. You can also do other things there as well. You can have general discussion. You're not going to be discussing Final Cut Pro on that one, though. Are the birds back? I don't think they are. I don't think they are. The birds are not there today. All right. I just wanted to come on here today to talk about this. Plus, I wanted to play my new amplifier, which I did at the beginning, this little positive grid thing. It's fantastic. It's just a little teeny thing. It's just a little teeny cube. Let me just pull it up here. But this thing is really, look, positive grid. It's got a few controls in the back. It's got a guitar amp on the top and stuff, but I really like this thing. It's battery powered. I think it lasts 8 hours. That's what they said, but it gets great tones. Great tones. With me and guitar playing, the tone is everything. I have you can see my Strat over there and my Gibson Les Paul. It's called a Firebrand Les Paul. It's mahogany body and stuff. And I have a couple of other Strats. That's not my main Strat. That's my secondary Strat. And I have a 69 Strat that I redid. But anyway. We'll be back Saturday, if not before, 11 o'clock, Final Cut TV and Coffee. I'm just going to check. Oh, we have a little watch thing there. So, your opinion on 10.6.6? Do you appreciate 10.6.6? If you like 10.6.6, for those that also updated to Final Cut on the iPad, have you found any things that you wish the iPad version had that it doesn't have? Because I've seen lists of things. I don't think it has compound clips. Obviously, it doesn't have a scrolling timeline, but the desktop version doesn't have one either. At least they should have paged, right? At least get to the end of the screen and page. Don't just go off the screen. It makes 0 sense to go off the screen with your playhead. Final Cut team, that makes no sense whatsoever. All right, I'm going to get out of here for today, and we'll be back Saturday. I don't expect any more Final Cut Pro news for today or this week. If you have anything more to say, you can follow me on Twitter, Richard Taylor TV. And as a matter of fact, I didn't even put that up there, did I? Here, let's do this. Like and subscribe over there on YouTube. Let me see what else. There's my logo. Of course, Richard Taylor. And I'll be on Twitter and Facebook. I have the Facebook groups. I have the Final Cut for iPad master list over there. Thank you very much for the thumbs up. Final Cut for iPad master list. Just go to the main page, fcpx.tv, And I even got a small Final Cut Pro 10.6.6 page right now, but it's not very big. It's just got release notes. Ian Anderson has an article, of course, over there at Pro Video Coalition. There's Steve Martin, and there's another 10.66 update somebody did. But mainly it's the master list. Final Cut for iPad is there, and it's got lots and lots of videos. So if you're into the Final Cut for iPad, look at all these videos that you have. Lots of them. So you have plenty of stuff to do this afternoon. Most of them are tutorials. There's also a couple of just basic reviews on these things. So, all right, I'm going to get out of here for today. Just wanted to stop in and continue the conversation. And I will be back on Saturday, if not before. Thanks, everybody, for stopping in. I appreciate it. Talk to you later.